Hi, I'm Reed. I'm the founder and CEO here at Stytch, and I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague, Max. Max, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we mean when we're talking today about how to make your app agent ready and what you'll be covering?
So my name is Max Gerber. I'm a software engineer at Stytch, and I've been working in the identity and access management space for about 8 years now. We're thinking a lot about how do we take existing software, existing systems, and open them up for agent access. So how do we take things that are already out there, tools we're already using that have our data, and make that data available to tools like ChatGPT or Cursor or Claude in a secure and scalable way. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about identity and access management, kind of basic concepts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the OAuth protocol. I'm going to talk about how you can apply the OAuth protocol to AI use cases to share your data with an agent. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about a demo at the end showing this in action. So
great. Excited to hear that. I know throughout this video series, we'll have folks talking about how to build agents. I think what I'm particularly excited about with your talk is how do we make the current world ready for agents? How do you enable existing apps to function with agents? So particularly excited to hear this side of the coin.
Yeah, I'm very excited to show it. So first, I guess we probably should mention what Stytch is, why we're talking about this, why we care. We both work at Stytch. Stytch is a consumer identity and access management company. So we help people add authentication, authorization features to their applications, things like login and user management. I spend pretty much all my free time trying to help people become OAuth identity providers. So we've got a nice little React component that they can drop into their application. And with the idea that if you become an identity provider, you can share data with agents and AI in a safe and secure way.
I also don't think it's an exaggeration to say that you probably do spend all of your free time helping people think about how to become OAuth 2 compliant. So I'm excited for people to learn from someone like you.
So I'm touched on this a little bit previously. We really want to make existing applications agent ready. So how do we take the data that already exists, expose it to agents, expose it to LLMs, expose it to ChatGPT and Claude and so on, while also providing a great experience, not only for the users who want everything to sort of just work, but also for the IT admins out there who want to have really strong control over how their organization data is shared. And we'll probably touch on this a lot during this video, but there's a really big difference in how data flows in consumer applications versus business applications. And when I am working with a consumer application and I'm the user, it's my data. I really want to be able to push it wherever I want. I want things to kind of just work and get out of the way for me. And that's very different from a business or an enterprise application where the data doesn't actually belong to the user. The data belongs to the company. And you're looking to get the IT admin approval for how that data moves around. You know, if every company out there starts sharing their company secrets with ChatGPT, I'm sure a lot of IT admins are going to be having a bit of a conniption.
Yep. We want to keep Howard, our in-house security and IT expert, happy is what we talk about when we talk about how we expose agents to employees at the company and allow them to use AI.
There's a frequent identity in our internal documents.
Yes.
So where I come from is primarily this consumer or customer identity and access management use case. So we have people who have existing products, and maybe they have an existing API, maybe they don't, but they're trying to repackage this API for consumption by agents that, more importantly, they don't own. And I think this is a little bit different from other people who are talking about exposing data maybe within a company, like taking company data from this team, exposing it to an agent ran by this team. We really think about how do you take data from, one organization and share it outside that organization into the outside world, which has a much different set of security considerations. And this also means that at my level of the stack, I'm not thinking too much about actually building agents. I'm thinking about building tools that agents can use. So really good example of this in the real world. Notion, tool we use every day, tool we love. Notion both has agent and LLM experiences built within the platform that have access to Notion data. But you can also use Notion as a tool in other systems. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to read my Notion database and look at all the issues there. And the sharing and security model between a Notion-owned asset talking to a Notion-owned asset and a Notion-owned asset talking to something just out there in the world is going to be really different.
Awesome. Makes a ton of sense.
And so we see a lot of these companies we're talking to, they want to figure out agents and what agents means for them. And for a lot of companies, this means taking their existing product, their existing data, and serving it up as a tool for these agents to consume. And really, it's like a renewed interest in how do we share data? How do we kind of decentralize the internet? And that's a really exciting, really, really fun thing. My favorite example of this, there's this company, BodySpec. Mm-hmm. They do DEXA scans. So they go and they stick you on a table and they scan you and they say, you have this much bone density. And it's a bunch of, nerdy little numbers and they give you a PDF at the end. And I was super surprised. I got sniped by the craziest Reddit ad that was like, hey, there's a BodySpec MCP server now. Mm-hmm. So this company that you never even think like, oh, they should have an API that will be super useful. They now have an MCP server and you can take your scan data, dump it into ChatGPT and it'll tell you, all about it and it'll give you insights. And this is something that is really beneficial for the company because they have a huge value add here. They really want to get their data to ChatGPT because it makes their existing product better and stickier.
Yeah.
And they need to figure out how to do that in a safe and secure way.
And I think that's a great example and maybe one worth just fleshing out a little bit of context for people on why BodySpec wanted to become agent ready. From that explanation, it sounds to me like, yes, maybe they could have built an agent embedded in their application, but probably it's not a super heavily used application after the maybe couple of times that you use it and review your initial data. And then two, my guess is they wanted to kind of stand on the shoulders of giants with ChatGPT's functionality to be able to not have to build the in-house AI expertise of what it meant to build that agent. Does that seem accurate or is there anything else that you'd add?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think the other thing that I'd add is when you allow ChatGPT to kind of be in the center of it all, now your customers can start taking data from all sorts of places. So you could take your BodySpec data and then maybe you've got some dietary data over here, what food you ate over the last 24 hours. And you can combine that really efficiently in ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. But if BodySpec is trying to build their own in-house chatbot and maintain integrations to all of these other systems and also become, AI LLM experts, that's a tall order for them. Yeah. So the ROI of, push this data out, make it open, make it available is much higher.
And have you already connected the BodySpec MCP server to your ChatGPT?
I have, yeah.
Is there any interesting insights that you not previously realized? You don't have to share too much, but maybe the course of that feedback.
Yeah. So I run a lot, and the bone density of my legs is 95th percentile. Which apparently is common for runners, but also means I'm really bad at swimming. So it's a good, convenient excuse.
I've always been a bad swimmer, and now that's going to be my excuse as to why I'm a runner.
Okay, great. No, that's a fantastic example, and I think to your point, makes a lot of sense why applications like BodySpec would be embracing this, just in terms of the value it can give to their users, the stickiness, and they kind of have to get to skip the need to build out this massive in-house AI team, but still get all the leverage out of it. Great.
And what's also really exciting is we've been sharing data over the internet for pretty much as long as we've had an internet. There's never been a time where people weren't trying to take data from one place and stick it somewhere else. And there are a lot of standards and a lot of thinking that have already gone into solving this problem. And OAuth has really emerged as the dominant standard over the last couple of decades of research and experimentation.
And now I'm excited for what I think we're about to dive into, which is a little bit more explanatory on OAuth, where this fits in. Because I have to tell you, my parents subscribe to our changelog, and my parents are not technical. And so every time I see them, and I just saw them this past weekend, I get a comment from either one or the others where like, looks really cool, but I don't understand anything that you're shipping. And so I'm excited that I think by the end of this video or this section that I could send this to them and maybe they'll understand what OAuth is, which is not something I've ever tried to explain before.
We're going to talk a little bit about authentication and authorization, basic concepts and definitions. We're going to go into the OAuth protocol, and then we're going to apply the OAuth protocol to MCP. So authentication and authorization, two words that are often in very similar domains, sound very similar, mean quite different things. Authentication is the process of determining, how do I know who you are? You say that you're Reed, but how do I actually know that you're Reed? Well, in real life, it's pretty easy, but over the internet, there needs to be some way to assert someone's identity. Otherwise, your bank account is just going to be handing out information to anyone who says that they're Reed. And there's a lot of different ways for this to happen with end users like you and me. We have, emails, we have passwords, we have tools like SAML SSO, and then plenty of other things that can be added on top, like two-factor, SMS OTP. There's all sorts of tools that go into verifying who a user is. And in the same way that we need to verify users, we often have to verify devices or applications. So if I have a service out there, I've got a machine talking to another machine, how do you identify a call coming from a machine that might not have an email address or a phone number? And there's another set of tools like API keys or client secrets or cryptography that can help you there. Well, authentication is ultimately about answering the question, how do I know who you are?
Yep.
And authorization is kind of the thing you want to do immediately after you answer the authentication question. Authorization is, how do I know you're allowed to do what you're trying to do? So if you're viewing, going back to that bank account example, if someone is saying, I want to view this bank account, well, are they authorized to do that? Do they have a relationship with this bank account? Do they have permission? And there are many, many, many different ways for systems to govern permission. There's a lot of different tools like RBAC, like ABAC, like REBAC. There's FGA. It's a lot of acronyms, and it's a very, very big space. And compared to the identity portion, it's a bit less standards driven. It's a lot more. There's many different approaches to solve the same problem depending on what companies need to do. But the ultimate goal is to determine, for a request coming in from the internet, all right, we already know who you are. Now, are you allowed to do the thing that you're trying to do?
Yep. Yeah, the analogy I've sometimes used with folks that, are less into the auth-n and auth-c space is the airport analogy of the authentication is when you go through security, they check your license, are you Reed? And then when you actually want to board a flight, get on a particular seat, they have to authorize that that's actually the flight that you paid for. Your seat is 5B or 15C or whatever it is. I still wouldn't say my parents necessarily get it, but they understand the shape of it a little bit more after that.
And this doesn't work too well with the FAA example, but when you have these authentication and authorization concepts, you can combine them into delegation, where given identity in a system can try to give its permissions, what it's authorized to do, to another identity in the system.
And so the FAA was really the worst analogy I could use to tee you up on this.
Yeah, if you go through security and then you go and you hand your passport to someone else.
Don't try this at home.
Oh, yeah. End up on some watch list by the end of this. And so the important part about delegation is I have a set of permissions. I can give those permissions to you or to an application or to an AI agent, but I can't give more permission than I have. I can only give preferably a subset of my permission. So if I am sharing information, let's say in Google Drive, I might share access to a single file with you, and I might give you viewer permission. I could also give you, editor, or I could give you access to a folder, but I'm not giving you access to my entire Google account. I'm just giving you access to a small portion of it. And so delegation is again, a big topic. And there's lots of different ways to implement it. Within a platform, like with Google, that delegation mechanism, who can share what access to what files, that's all proprietary. That's how it works within Google. But when you have delegation mechanisms between different applications owned by different people, OAuth has kind of occurred as the most popular mechanism. So delegation is really, really common between users and apps today. I, as a user, will authorize some application to access data on my behalf. And really what the agent push is about swapping in the word agent for the word app. I want to grant this agent the ability to edit my data, to process payments on my behalf, to do things using my identity and my permissions without me necessarily being the one making every single decision. Oh, let's talk about OAuth.
Couldn't be more excited.
So OAuth is a collection of protocols for inter-service authorization on the web. And it's a pretty big space. There's over 40 published RFCs from multiple organizations like the IETF and the OpenID Foundation. And what I really love about OAuth is it enables you to stand on the shoulders of giants. A lot of people much, much, much smarter than me have spent many, many, many years getting this protocol in a really good state. And if I go and use the protocol, I don't need to solve all the problems that they already solved. It's like borrowing decades of research and development out there available for free with a rich ecosystem. I get excited.
That's a good point you make, because something I've seen maybe from folks that it seems to me like they're maybe less deeply entrenched or involved in the auth community is I'll hear people proposing net new standards for doing this. And I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, I've been pitched over the last couple of weeks by different folks, small companies, like OAuth 3, a different type of OAuth for just AI agents that's not necessarily building on all of it. And so I thought your point about everything that's already been solved, how much can we extend it to continue to solve the other challenges, is just maybe a good point to like share a little bit more on them, how you think, like why you think this will continue to be maybe the basis or primitive for these experiences.
Yeah, OAuth isn't static in the sense that it's a solved problem. It's still a very rapidly changing space compared to, I guess, other fields like maybe physics. OAuth goes through a standards process, and there's a standards body that meets a couple of times a year. And they will go and look at the active issues with the protocol and figure out ways to address them. But they are still participating in the ecosystem, and they try really, really hard to build on what came before and to not make breaking changes. And so it's like, sure, you can go and start completely from scratch with something, and you'll be able to go really, really far, really fast when you don't have to deal with legacy implementations and considerations. But you also lose all the benefits of the ecosystem. So if somebody comes up with OAuth 3.0 that's completely different, or some new authorization standard, then there's no tooling for it, there's no library for it, versus if I go and I try to introduce somebody to OAuth, there's hundreds of hours of documentation on YouTube, there's client libraries in every single language, there's tons of OAuth identity providers out there. And that's really, really powerful, and attaching yourself to that ecosystem is, I still think for 95% of the world is the right move.
I think that's a great explanation. And I think you summed it up well, that framing of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So thank you for that.
So OAuth is really about taking user data from one place on the internet and sticking it somewhere else. And it describes a framework for how the user and the service provider, the one owning that data, can kind of agree how this data should be shared. And OAuth flows are all over the place. I can use OAuth to sign in from one website to another. I can sign into Farmville with my Facebook account. I can use OAuth to sign in from a website to a native app. So if I go and I open up Slack, I log in using my website, using the Slack website, but I end up in the native app experience. And my favorite is native app to TV. If you're going and you're sitting on the couch and you're trying to log into your Netflix account, you get that nice QR code on the screen, you scan it with your phone, and then suddenly you're logged into your Netflix account on the TV. That's also OAuth.
Yeah, I think it's a great reminder of, without OAuth, how painful that experience would be if you're trying to click around in order to enter a password. And so one of the many ways that OAuth has made our daily lives better.
Yeah. Was it 12 characters, an uppercase, a lowercase, a special character on your TV remote?
Yep.
So we'll do a little bit of OAuth-specific terminology. We've got the authorization server or the identity provider. Going back to that Netflix example, Netflix.com is going to function as our authorization server. And the authorization server's job is to validate the user's identity. You are who you say you are. And then once the server knows that, it's going to issue an access token, or it has the ability to issue an access token. We have a resource server. This is going to be like the Netflix servers up in the data centers that contain all of the movies. And this resource server has some full data, but it's only going to give that data out if you give it an access token. And then finally, we have an OAuth client. The OAuth client wants to access the data in the resource server, but needs an access token in order to do so. And this access token allows it to assume the permissions of the user. And our Netflix-enabled television is our client. So OAuth is really all about these access tokens. They're kind of the underlying thing that we're all here to get. Access tokens have some really nice properties. They're scoped to the user who granted them. So they have the permissions of the user, and the client can't do anything the user couldn't do themselves. So they have that delegation aspect we talked about earlier. And the user can narrow down the permissions that they are granting to the client through mechanisms within the OAuth protocol. The most common is using a mechanism called a scope. So I will go and I will grant my television the watch movie scope, but I'm not going to grant it the edit credit card scope because I don't want my television to have access to my billing information. And so here is an example of the most common OAuth flow, the auth code flow. We're not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on the details of the flow. There's a lot of really, really good resources out there. But the point I want to make is we've got all of these lines between two different applications, between your app and here. We broke from the Netflix example. We're doing Google instead. And OAuth defines the lines in between. OAuth defines the mechanism by which a token can be requested. It defines the mechanism by which the server responds. It defines some intermediate steps. But OAuth doesn't say anything about how your application behaves outside of these lines.
Okay.
So OAuth doesn't say this is how a user should log in. You know, should they use a password? Should they use an email? Should they do something else? OAuth doesn't say how do you ask the user to consent to their data being shared. So sometimes you can say, you know, I don't need to ask the user anything because I own this identity provider. I own the client. I don't think Netflix says, do you want to share your data with your TV? They just assume that you do.
Yeah.
And then in other cases, when you have third-party applications being built, you want to be very, very careful letting the user know this is exactly how your data is going to be shared. This is how this application says it's going to use your data. Or do you agree to share this data or not? Mm-hmm. And all of this is really up to the application to decide and to build out. Let's talk about OAuth and the model context protocol. So I'm not going to go super far into what the model context protocol is or how it works. I am going to have some opinions about it, though. Essentially, the model context protocol is a standard way for LLMs and agents to access external data sources. Whether that's a file on your computer, whether that's a GitHub repo or something in Google Drive or your Slack account. Instead of having all these point-to-point integrations where ChatGPT has to integrate with Slack and then Cursor has to integrate with Slack and Codex has to integrate with Slack, everything just agrees to speak one standard unifying protocol. And we don't need to deal with all that point-to-point code.
Yep.
And the first iteration of MCP came out of the language server protocol, and it was entirely local only. And I think that this was kind of a false start for the ecosystem. Local only is really great for dealing with like local only files, or maybe playing a song or stopping a song or doing video editing. But most of my time on the computer, most of my files, most of my important data isn't on my laptop.
Yep.
It's in the cloud, it's in different providers. And a lot of early MCP tool choices, like seeking to address this issue, were using API keys. So if you were using the Jira MCP server, the Jira MCP server asks you to go and download a piece of code to run locally, and then go out and get an API key and then drop that in as an environment variable. And if you're watching this video, if you're in this room, like that's probably totally fine. You know, we're here because we're technical. We're having a technical discussion about AI and agents. The idea of setting an environment variable or running a little bit of code downloaded from the internet, like A-okay by us. But that's a huge adoption barrier for the rest of the world. You know, I remember having a conversation with my sister where she's like, what is a pip? What is a shell? What is a Python? Why do I have to go through all this? Is this a zoo? And downloading software to be executed locally is a bit of a security nightmare for some folks. It's very difficult for non-technical people to be debugging, you know, what version of Node they have installed and why is something, you know, not on their execution path and all sorts of nonsense. API keys are kind of hard to administer. You know, let's say you were trying to roll out some sort of LLM-based learning software to a whole bunch of people on a high school campus. You had to give every single high schooler their own API key. I don't know how well it would go. I don't think it would go very well. And so we've seen a much bigger push recently to remote first servers that are hosted in the cloud.
Yep.
And we've seen a much bigger push to having these servers gated through OAuth.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. I think just seeing the UX from some of the local MCPs to setting up just on my own computer the MCP off was, it does feel like something I could show to my parents. They could get the value of it. That they might not understand everything that's happening in the background, but they could at least in the remote MCP server use case, I think could start, you know, if they wanted to analyze their body spec scan and data in ChatGPT versus just not possible months ago when it was just local.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen already, I think Cursor and VS Code have like one-click MCP installations. And it's so nice. You don't have to deal with your MCP JSON file anymore. You don't have to deal with all sorts of things. It's just click a button, MCP server installed. And it's very, very, very nice. So mapping OAuth onto the MCP protocol. MCP clients are OAuth clients. So our agents are LLMs. And MCP servers are OAuth resource servers. They have access, they have data stored with them, and they're only going to expose that data given a valid access token. And this means that MCP servers need authorization servers to give out access tokens that the MCP servers can validate.
Great. So now I feel like we have a much better sense of OAuth, where MCP servers fit in. I'd love to make it a little bit more tangible and concrete for the audience. Is there a demo you could show us just to, you know, walk through it a little bit more visuals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to fire up the MCP inspector. This is a tool that you can use to kind of debug and diagnose MCP servers and investigate, you know, what you can do with them, what tools they provide. And fortunately, Stytch is an MCP server.
Would you look at that?
So we're going to go and we're going to run through first the OAuth flow in like super fine-grained detail, and then we're going to show kind of the end result and the data that's being stored and passed around. All right. So we're going to go through the kind of advanced auth settings and walk through the OAuth debugger, which is a really, really, really well put together tool. And what this is going to do is show us every single step that the MCP inspector goes through when it's kicking off an OAuth flow, and kind of give us a peek under the hood and all the requests and responses. So the first thing that the inspector is going to do, reaching out to this MCP server, is it needs to learn who is the authorization server that this MCP server trusts. Where should it direct the user to go and log in and come back with an access token? So it makes this request. It gets the authorization server, and then it makes a request to the authorization server and finds out information about where the user should go to authorize the request, where tokens should come from, and so on, and a whole bunch of metadata here. Now the inspector is going to register itself inside the AS. We see it sends off a request. It says, my name is MCP inspector. I want to use the authorization code rant type, and it is issued a client ID. Now it can use this client ID to put together an authorization URL, and it's going to ask the user to visit this, and this really kicks off the OAuth flow. This is how the MCP inspector asks the user, hey, please grant me access to your account with these scopes, with these permissions. So we'll click through here, and we're given a little consent dialog that explains exactly what resources the inspector is asking to access, how it wants to use this data, what it will be able to do. And of course, I'm going to allow this. And so I get back an authorization code. And if I give this authorization code to the inspector, then I see that the inspector is issued an access token, and we're all logged in. Now, hopping out of the debug mode, we're going to go through an OAuth flow in the regular mode, and we find out it worked. We're logged in, and now we have tools that can actually interact with my Stytch project account. So let's go and create a project. We're going to call this Great Demo Read and Max. This is going to be a consumer project. Okay, and this works. Now if I go into my Stytch dashboard, Great Demo Read and Max.
Wow. Able to control everything from the chat interface and or any other AI client and AI chatbot. So very cool to see it kind of all come together there.
So my theory, my hypothesis, if you take away anything from this video, I think that you should be an OAuth maximalist. I think that your product that you make should be an OAuth provider. And I also think that the products that you use day in and day out should be OAuth providers as well. And if you are an OAuth provider, that's going to mean that you can share your data with these LLMs and with these agents. And if you're using products from OAuth providers, you get to take your data from all these disparate systems and give it to your agent and let your agent do really cool things with it. And I think that's really, really exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Max. I'm sure you're leading the charge on the new OAuth Maxi terminology. Maybe there'll be a subreddit that you'll be an administrator for in the future there, where people can join. But in all seriousness, just want to say thank you for walking everyone through that. As a kind of quick reminder, today we wanted to walk through what it looks like to make your existing app agent ready. We'll be walking through a lot of similar series, but different topics around how do apps and how does the world become agent ready, such as how do you build agents, how do you secure them, observability, things like that. And so we hope that you join us for the rest of those sessions as well. And until then, where can folks find you online if they want to follow you or hear more about what you have to say?
There's the Stytch Slack group. Join that and ask about agents. There's also an MCP Discord group I'm pretty active in.
Great.
And LinkedIn, Max Gerber.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Max. And yeah, we'll be excited to bring you more content soon. And thanks for tuning in.